Hi, friends. Welcome again to another episode of Beyond the Clouds S2S Transformation. And speaking of transformation, we want to know what's happening in every part of the world. Richard Osibanjo and I were colleagues for a short time at Intel, and I learned a lot just by observing the kind of things he shares above and beyond leadership and technology. Richard, tell us about your journey. How did you end up becoming the Richard Osibanjo I know? How did you start off and become who you are today?
Well, thank you so much, Shankar, for having me on your show, your podcast, your videocast. It's always an opportunity to connect with you. You're full of energy, full of light. And one thing I do know is you truly want to make a difference in the world and especially in the lives of your listeners as well. How did I end up? I'm going to make this quick because that itself could take a very long time. Grew up, born and raised in Nigeria. I had the opportunity of having parents who were highly educated. So my dad did his PhD in University of Birmingham in London. My mom was an accountant. She also did part of her training in England as well. And going a little bit back, my grandfather was a chauffeur, and my dad was one in 26 children. Of course, keep your mind in check. It's polygamy is a thing, in Africa, at least it was legal. So my grandfather had a lot of wives. My grandmother was the first. And one thing that often happened, like my father told me, was anytime they had arguments with each other, my father would always threaten my own dad and say he wasn't going to pay for the school fees. Cut the long story short, my father got into school, got scholarships. He fell in love with chemistry. Ultimately, he went to England, and the rest they often say is history. But looking at my dad's background of where he came from, coming from poverty, he felt chemistry was the all and be all. If you sat with my dad today, it's almost like he has a mission in the world that everybody should study chemistry. Everything starts and ends with chemistry. So the consequence of that was he wanted all his kids to study chemistry. And again, for good reason, he wanted us to be successful. He had found the way. So he thought it was the only way at that point in time. So I ended up, pursuing chemistry as well. And one thing my dad will often say is that if he came back into this world, he was going to study chemistry. I got to a point in my life and said, well, if I came back into this world, would I want to study chemistry? And when I came to the truthful conclusion, I said the answer was no. Then the question was, like my dad, I see how passionate and how he enjoys his things, what he does. Even at 60s, 70s, today he's still working very late because for him, he enjoys it. So that began my journey in terms of I need to find something like my dad had discovered that I could give the rest of my life to. In a nutshell, that's what led me to where I am today.
So no wonder, Richard, you have such great chemistry with people. So I believe you studied chemistry for quite some time, and then you transitioned into this more humane role of connecting with people. Tell us how this transition happened.
So thank you, Shankar. So, like I mentioned, when I saw like my dad, even in his 60s, 70s, still staying up till 1 a.m., 2 a.m. at night, not because he had to, but because he wanted to. And it reminds me of a singer who said that I didn't choose music, music chose me. So, and for
Yes.
me, it became a life mission or dream for me to find what was that thing that life had chosen me for. I believe I had to discover something. So once I got to the question of if I came back to in this world, would I want to do chemistry again? And my answer was no, then definitely the next natural path is, so what was that thing? And this took me a lot of introspection. It took me to speaking with so many people, doing a lot of whether it was Strengths Finder, this, you know, Maya Briggs, so many things to really find out that who is this person? Because one of the things that if we think deeply about, if you look, for example, at a pencil, we call it a pencil, and immediately you understand what a pencil does. If I talk about a chair, you understand what a chair does. If I talk about a mouse, you understand what a mouse is. If I talk about an iPhone, you know what an iPhone does. But when it comes to us humans, we have different names. But if I say Richard, Richard could mean several things. So what it means that I have to go on that part of discovery to really understand who is Richard and what does Richard do and who is Richard for. So those are some of the things I did, speaking with a lot of people, doing a lot of leadership assessments, being reflective of myself, trying to understand the patterns. There's one tool people say in terms of draw a timeline of your life. 0 to 5 or 0 to 10. And, on the high points, find out what were those things that you were super excited about and what were those things that were in the lows. And if you just do that time point, whether it's 0 to 5 or 0 to 10, up to what your age is, you now begin to see what are those patterns that I imagine. But ultimately, one of the things looking back now that I ultimately did, I created this tool which I call the 3Ps plus V. And the 3Ps plus V typically just talks about what's my potential? And potential defined as what am I capable of doing, but I haven't become yet. So, for example, bread doesn't exist naturally in nature. It exists as flour. You have as wheat. Wheat becomes flour. You have to go through a process before you have bread at the other end of the line. Gasoline doesn't exist naturally in nature. It exists as crude oil. Once you get crude oil, you have to give it some form of process, then you get gas and all of that. So what are those hidden strengths? What are those talents that I have? That if I'm able to develop it, first of all, I have to discover it. Then once I'm able to discover it and I develop it, what does that come out? So that was potential. The other thing I also looked about myself was what was those things I was passionate about? What were those things that gave me energy? There's some certain activities you do, it just once you're done, you're like, you're just drained. But what are those things that even if they woke me up at 2 or 3 a.m. in the morning, yes, I might feel tired, but even just doing that thing is an expression of who I am. Like I think it was Alan Mulally. One of the things he said is that work is love made visible. So work is love made visible. So asking myself that when you're thinking about passion, what is that work that is made visible or those activities that I'm doing that I'm really in love with and brings out the energy inside of me? The third thing I focus on in my model is what I call purpose. And purpose is the original intent for why something was designed or why something was created. So, and one thing about purpose is it's not about you. Your life is not about you. And why I say that is when you think of an apple tree does not eat its own fruit. That fruit is to cater to other people. So whatever gifts or strengths or talents that you have is not for you. Is in the service of something bigger. So making sure that you align to your purpose. And of course, the V part of it is really connecting with your values, making sure all of that are all aligned. So when I started speaking to people about my 3Ps plus B, so people asked me the question at the point in time. One of my good friends, Frank Wagner, I said, Richard, have you heard of Ikigai? At the point when he said it, I said, no. I said, what is that? So Ikigai is this Japanese way of life or reason for being. And so when I saw that, I was really excited because I came up with my own independently. So when I saw Ikigai, I'm like, oh, Richard, you're up to something. And the good thing, again, going back to your question, Shankar, is Ikigai typically will ask you 4 questions. What is something that you love? What is something that you are great at? What is something the world needs? And it talks about the financial element. What is that thing you get paid to do? So just looking at those combinations of things was what has helped me on my journey to get to where I am today.
That's fascinating. And from what I can see, Richard, you are now helping others get on to their true purpose. Tell us a little bit about the new book that you released. I can't imagine, you know, life without that book. You have contributed tremendously to people like me who never think about these things every day.
Yeah, my latest book is called Rich Nuggets. I released my first book when I was in grad school, which is right behind me, Turning Point. And I discovered that my first book was really an expression of there was something deep inside of me that needed expression, that I needed to connect with. That's how that book was born. Then the second one was typically the 5 essential things every leader must get right. Again, like you mentioned, I have a huge passion for leadership. We have over 8 billion people in the world. Everybody comes to work, they want to do great things, but one of the things you see is the people or leaders they're in contact with makes a huge difference in terms of the return on investment people get and organizations get as well. So Rich Nuggets for me has things that are reflections, experiences, learnings, insights I've gotten from either different people, different projects that have all come together. And I think I've been collecting them for about 9 years, and I just kept writing them down. That ultimately one day I'll be able to share it because again, we want to be able to help people go further. So people are not starting from scratch; they're starting from experience.
That's so generous of you. I've been interviewing people who are doing incredible things, but putting that into writing is a lot of work. And thank you for doing that. I believe you made this transition within Intel from engineering management into other things. What was the journey like, and how did Intel embrace all the richness you had to provide to the company?
I have a personal loyalty towards Intel. And the reason was being an international student, you know how difficult it is to be able to, as a student visa, to be able to get a job to stay in the US. So Intel was one of two companies that was even going to say, hey, we're even going to consider you, even for the fact that I did not even have, the right to stay in the US at that time was just a student visa. And I remember the person who was interviewing me, his name was Jack. And I said, hey, Jack, I'm a people person. I actually showed him my book, Turning Points. I said, yes, I'm good with engineering, but I also love people. And Jack said, Intel is looking for diverse people. Intel is looking for people who think differently and will be happy to make the connection. So that's how I got to Intel. So I spent about 3 years directly as the senior process engineer. And one of the things, again, I just found out that I love the chemistry of people more than the chemistry of atoms. I felt that with the chemistry of people, which I had a bigger passion for, I could actually help create an environment that the people who were working on the floor, working in the fabs, working in different places would be extremely excited to come to. So that's what really began my journey. And Intel has been very supportive. It's been very helpful. As long as one of the things again is I'm very aware of what Intel wants to do in an organization. We want to create cultures that helps people to go faster, to help people to win, be their best selves. And at the same time, of course, we are not a charity organization. We want to make profit too. So understanding those two case points that regardless of what I wanted to pursue, it was a win-win. I was winning, being my authentic self, and I was also winning, helping Intel create that culture he wants to aspire to be.
So from semiconductor processes, you went to life processes. That is totally amazing. And we live in these very chaotic times. Things are changing all the time, both in technology as well as the way business is done today. I was passionate about writing. It took me a lot longer to even start to write. What advice would you give today for people who have distinctly different skills than what the market wants? How should people approach that?
So I'm going to use this analogy. When you think of an apple seed, right? An apple seed, if you left it on a table and it doesn't degrade, if you come back in 50 years, you're still going to find that apple seed there. If that apple seed is planted, it may or may not, depending on the soil and the environment, ultimately produce an apple tree and have fruits on it. At that point in time, you can actually say the apple was successful because it went from seed to fruit. But ultimately, the true measure of success for me is fulfillment. And when you think of the concept of purpose, it's not just the seed becoming an apple fruit, but it's that fruit nourishing the people. They say take an apple a day and it keeps the doctor away. So when I look at my own experiences, one of the things I'll say is number one, you have to discover what that thing is. What's that thing that fills your bucket? What's that thing that gets you excited? And I get it. There are life commitments that you need to attend to. There are so many things that for the longest of times, I never even thought doing what I was doing was something that you could do as a job. I thought it was a hobby because in the environment I came from back in the time, it wasn't a thing at all. So it just had to be a hobby. But coming to the US, when I read this book, Good to Great by Jim Collins, my eyes were opened and enlightened. So number one, discover that thing you really love, that thing that you're good at. Number two, ask yourself, how do I get there? And so for me, before I even transitioned from the chemistry of processes into Shankar said the processes of life, I had to do 2 jobs at Intel for about 4 months. I was working 60, 70 hours a week. Again, my choice. Nobody asked me to at that point in time. Nobody put any pressure on expectation on me. I took it on because I said, I have a passion for something. This really floats my boat. And again, at that point in time, it was just a desire, a passion. I didn't know if it was going to work, but I gave it a shot. The other thing you can do is like, oh, I have a passion for something and you go quit your day job. A lot of studies have shown that the grass always seems greener on the other side. At times, it's easier to wet where you are and water your own lawn. So my advice is number one, discover what you are good at, then have a plan. The plan is, am I going to do it 20 to 80%? 20 to 80% means I'm going to invest probably after work, invest 20% of my time, to begin to grow, learn, develop that thing I'm passionate about. 80% of my time I'm focused on the core work that I'm doing. Then as the 20% begins to grow, and when I mean 20%, I'm volunteering, exposing myself to different experiences, meeting a lot of people. Is there going to be enough interest? They can slowly begin to make the transition. At Intel, we talk about gig assignments, whether it's gig assignment is more of like an internal internship that you can go and see. Is like a try before you buy. So do those experiences to see if it's something that you really want to do, rather than just taking a plunge. And because you have to also consider other factors, your family, people you might be helping back at home, and so many other things.
Richard, your work is at the intersection of leadership and in a company that is one of the leaders in the changing times, whether it's hardware, software, AI, you name it, blockchain. Um, Now, given the rate at which things are changing, are the roles of leaders changing? Do you think there'll be an AI-enabled leader who would do things differently, or could take support from a lot of these technologies going forward?
Great question, Shankar. I've been thinking about that. And the answer for me is, well, from a change perspective, nothing is constant. Things are always changing. It's just we're living in times of unprecedented pace of change. To answer your question, I think about someone like Betty White. Even up to was 99, she was acting. She was relevant. But one of the things I thought about is when you think about the acting industry, at some point there must have been plays people did at their backyard. At some point they got to a stage. At some point they got to the cinemas. At some point it's on video. At some point is now we are talking about streaming. So when we look at people's gifts and their talents, that doesn't change. The technology always changes. Now the question we should be asking ourselves is that while my gift and talent itself, like the gift of acting in case of Betty White, she didn't swap that for something else. But the question is, am I adapting my talent that it becomes a good form factor for technology? You mentioned hardware and software. So when they're always better together. So whether you look at your talents as hardware and technology as software, whatever you want to look at it, was asking the question, how can ChatGPT world, how can I use my talent? How can I partner with this technology that helps me become more relevant? Because as you know, Shankar, if you don't get updated, you are going to become outdated, even with our software. After some time, they'll say, we are sorry, we do not support this anymore. So it's that constant thing. Then the second question you mentioned is in terms of the AI leader. One of the things I thought about is if somebody gave me an AI racket right now, and this AI racket has been worked with Serena Williams, um, Andrew Murray, and all the top shots, Coco Gauff and all these people who are doing extremely well. If they gave me that racket, imagine if they gave Serena Williams that same racket and both of us went head-on-head combat. Yes, I have the rackets that can help me beat Serena, but there's a lot of things in terms of experience that AI at this point in time does not yet have. The emotional intelligence aspect of things, which you cannot just code. So regardless of, and even in AI, I can ask AI, Richard, give me 5 things on how to become a good leader. Give me 5 things in terms of how to talk to my employees. But it's again, leadership is a thing of the heart. While ChatGPT can give me a script, but it needs to be combined with heart. That heart thing, I have to work on myself. No technology in the world can help me do that. So, but when I compare heart and apply with technology, I go faster, I go further.
You used a phrase I've never heard before, which was the apple tree does not eat its own apple. Where did you hear it from? I'm very curious because it's such a beautiful way of understanding our role in an interconnected world and how we need to serve others, not just this person.
So I first heard it from Dr. Miles Monroe. Dr. Miles Monroe he's late now. He's one of my mentors. And for me, it just embraces the concept of purpose. So that's how I relate to it. Because when you think about the apple tree, it does not eat its own fruit, yet it produces it, but it lets you know that your life is not about me. The brother side of that is also something I learned from another mentor of mine, Dr. John Maxwell. One of the things he talks about significance and he talks about success. Success is adding value to me Significance is adding value to others. It's possible to be successful and not be significant, but it's impossible to be significant and not be successful. Because think of a day trader, somebody who trades from home, and the person can be making millions in their living room, wherever they are, and they live a beautiful life. But if that person disappeared from the face of the earth, who cares? Maybe the bank account. But when you think about people who invest in the lives of other people, who are helping them discover their voices, find their footing, helping them become more successful, that's the true riches of people.
And Richard, you brought up the idea of 3P plus V. Tell us more about it. I've never heard of it. And how does it work in helping people find their true purpose? And how is it different or similar to the Japanese idea of Ikigai?
Thanks, Shankar. So, how I came up with that is for most of my life, I have a bachelor's, I have a master's, and I have a PhD in chemistry. So, when I started thinking I needed to transition my career from the chemistry of atoms, silicon, wafers to the chemistry of people, and as you call it, the chemistry of life, one of the things I ask is so thinking back. So, I came through this in terms of reflecting back. Like people come and ask me, like, Richard, how do I discover what my strength is? Richard, how do I discover the path I'm meant to go on? While I don't think anyone on earth can actually tell you that because it's a personal journey. But one of the things I say, hey, this is a tool and a framework that worked for me. And for me, I truly believe it starts with discovery. If I have a corn seed and I have an apple seed, I ask people a question. If I plant them, let's assume that I'm in Portland, let's assume it's summertime, and I plant them in Portland right now, apple and corn, summer. Which one is likely to grow? Remember, none of them might grow, but which one has a better chance of growing? My audience, there's always a mixture of people that shows up with both. But the one that is actually likely to grow is the corn seed. Why is that? An apple seed requires cold temperatures in order for the seed to be activated, in order for it to grow. Now, let's think of the implication of that. If I'm not aware of that, think of myself as a farmer. I have 2 acres of land. On one side, I want to plant corn. On the other side, I want to plant apples. If I have no awareness of that information, that an apple has to be planted in cold temperatures, preferably in the fall, I'm going to plant them 50-50. I see the corn growing. All of a sudden, I see the apple not growing. What do? I go and treat the land. I call in experts. All of a sudden, I say maybe it's the seed. And what's happening is because I have no awareness. So when I go back to the 3Ps plus V, is understanding what is my potential? What am I capable of doing? What are those things since I've been growing up, born, that people have always given me compliments about? Oh my goodness, you're so good at this. Like this doesn't cost you any effort. By the way, Strength Finder talks them as what are those things that come easy to you, you excel and you enjoy. But the thing is that because these things come so easily to us, we take them for granted. So
Yeah,
looking at the 3Ps plus V, Shankar, is the first part is the potential, which you have to discover. And discovery, speak to your parents, speak to your loved ones, speak to people you trust. That kind of helps you. When I look at that in terms of the Ikigai, Ikigai is asking you the question, what do you love to do? So that for me, the Ikigai maybe is moving closer to the passion one for my other P. What are those things that energize you? So which to Ikigai is, what are the things do you love? What are the things that you are good at? What are those? And also, I often ask people, what are those things that people come to you for? Because if I think I'm an apple tree and people keep coming to ask me for bananas, then I have to ask myself a question: what vibe am I giving off that people are always coming to ask me for bananas? Or if people don't even come and ask me for apple fruit, they're coming to ask me for biscuits. It's like, don't they even see these things in me? So what that does for me is it helps me to trigger a different conversation. Is it that what I think I'm good at is not what people are saying? Is that a result that I'm thinking too highly of myself? When you think things like American Idol, whereby some people think they can sing and they open their mouth, you're like, whew, I just dodged a bullet. Like, didn't somebody tell them? Or the question is the apple fruit so high in the sky and the tree that people cannot reach it, which is more of a question of awareness. So these introspective things and also the things people are coming for us should be giving us some alignment. Because remember, your product is not for you, it's for people. So it's not whether I think I'm good at it, but what are the customers who are going to benefit from this, or my clients? What are they going to say about it as well? And of course, there's the purpose one, which I spoke about earlier. Then also I spoke about your core values as well. And there are a lot of tests online you can do to help you find out what are my core values. And I think your core values are like your North Star. They're like your compass when decisions come and say, what's most important for me? So I'm making sure that I'm living my core values every day.
Potential, purpose, passion, and your core values. It's a wonderful way of looking at. And is that all covered in your new book?
That's coming in my fourth book. I've not finalized what that is. It's about finding yourself and becoming the best version of yourself. But ultimately, becoming the best version of yourself, again, it's not about you. If a leader wants to improve the organization, the leader has to improve themselves. If you want to change the world, you have to change yourself. And when you find yourself and your best version of yourself, that means you're able to give the best version of yourself to other people. So the fourth book I'm going to be working again, whether you look at it, I have 5 M's I usually work with. I call it the Richard 5 M's. The first one is whether is the messenger. You think of a male man or a male woman, the post team, they're going to deliver letters. The letter is not for them. So Shankar, what would you call a male person who keeps other people's mails? What would you call them?
A thief, a
Oh,
robber. Wow.
oh. So Shankar, your words, not mine. So if you look at the concept of a messenger, each and every one of us has a gift that we are meant to deliver to the world. Think of an apple tree. The fruit is not for the tree, it's to deliver it to a customer. So if the apple tree holds on to that fruit and never gives anyone, it's not for it. That means the apple tree is being a thief. So you and I need to ask ourselves, what is the gift that nature has given us? What's the gift God has given us that He expects us to share with other people? So that's the messenger. So I use the word messenger for you to realize you're meant to deliver something, it's not for you. Then when I go to the second M, which I call your mission, my mission is what am I meant to be doing in order for me to achieve my big vision that I have? What does that take? And very quickly, I talk in terms of alignment. That when you think of a job is 2 circles. Who I am and what I do are 2 different buckets. And when you think about people who are in jobs, who are doing daily jobs, what's happening is they're thinking about what they can get from the other bucket. So the other job, the job they have might have good financing, and that financing might help them enjoy their hobby, travel, they can support their families back at home, but do they really enjoy the job? No. And how do you know if you're in a job? Again, think about when you are in school. Once it's top of the hour and they ring the bell, you're very quick to want to get out. Think about if you're in a job, you're always living for the weekend. You can't wait for the weekend to come. If there's anything you can do to get out of the work that you're doing, you want to get out of it. Because what you are really in there for is what you can get from it that you are giving to something else. The other one I talk about is career. A career for me is like a Venn diagram. There's a sort of overlap, 20%, 60%, who knows? But you've been doing it for a very long time. It's part of your sleep. In this, it might be your comfort zone. To a large degree, you're also getting something from your career as well. The last bucket, which I talk about, is what I call the calling and your giftings as well. In this particular bucket, the 2 circles are aligned. It's like one big circle. Who you are and what you do is one. And this for me is the epitome of you becoming your best self. So that's typically what's about. So I talk in terms of the messenger, I talk in terms of the mission, I talk in terms of the mindset. What mindset do I need to embrace in order for me to achieve the purpose that I have ahead of me? The other M I talk about is membership. A leader who is working and there's nobody following is just taking a walk, as John Maxwell would describe that. So when you think about leaders, leaders need teams around them as individuals. That could be a coach, a mentor, an advocate, a balcony friend. You have different people you need in your life. One is too small a number to achieve success. If you can do it all by yourself, it's not big enough. So you need teams of people who are going to help you. In organizations, in particular, when you think of a landlord and a landlord has huge ownership over the house, so he wants the house to be okay. So whether if he wants to sell or he wants to rent, he wants it to be in condition. But what's the motivation of the tenant? The tenant just wants to be there to pay, and at the end of the day, they want to get their deposit. A tenant is not thinking of making the house better because he doesn't have any equity in it. So when we are talking about the concept of membership, the question is, how do leaders help their employees not to think like tenants, right? But to think more like landlords. And the question to that is, how do you make your employees feel that they have equity in the business other than just stocks? How do they feel like they are co-owners? So let me give you an example. We've been talking about people returning to work. And from a lot of the things we are reading in the news is either people are giving mandates, they're giving ultimatums. Let's just look at that example. When a leader gives an ultimatum and says that you have to do X, Y, Z, and if you do not, this is the consequence, that to me sounds more like a landlord. A landlord will say, this is your contract. I told you not to do X, Y, and Z, and if you violate that contract, you are gone. But let's flip the switch. Let's now come to democracy. Let's think of our presidents, our governors, our people acting on the local level. They can't just tell you, give you mandates and say you are gone because they see that they are representing the people. So their job there is to help people become successful. So they don't mandate, they negotiate. So what's happening is that from the membership bucket, leaders are unintentionally creating a landlord-tenant mindset versus creating an owner, whereby they are negotiating, asking the question, do you know what, team? I know you want this business to be successful. You working from home is not helping us. What do we need to do to encourage you to come back to work, even if it's 2 or 3 times a week? What will help you come back? It's a totally different conversation, it's a totally different mindset. And the last one, of course, is the marketplace. The marketplace is the backstage is for preparation, the front stage is for performance. So the marketplace is where you now come and offer what you have. And again, the mindset that brings you there, very important, because in the marketplace, people are going to judge you. But again, it's in the marketplace that you deliver your value. Can you imagine a doctor who is on the plane and somebody is having a heart attack and the doctor is saying, oh, I'm shy. I don't want people to say I'm showing off. No, if you have the gift, you have to show up. That's why we have marketing departments. That's why they talk about the bestseller, not the best writer. So you have to advertise the work that you do, even if you're shy of advertising yourself. Think about Whitney Houston today. How many people have met Whitney Houston in person before? Less than 1%. But
Very true.
when we talk about Whitney Houston, we think of her gift, her talent for music. That's the first thing that comes to our mind. So it's not about you. Again, it's about the gifts and the difference that you're making in the world. So that's the synopsis of what that is going to look like.
I can't wait to get my hands on that. And you're truly a living coach. And I'm very grateful. A shout out to some of my other amazing coaches at Intel, Bea, Darius, Grazian, Sean Cunningham. We had a fantastic group of people that were supporting each other to grow. I'm going to switch topics to technology again. We are in the midst of unprecedented access to technology, but I also see that many people in other parts of the world don't have access to either high-speed connectivity devices and AI and so on. Do you think this is going to increase the digital divide, or are we getting to a world where there's more equity?
For somebody who is from a developing country, I kind of see things from both sides. The one aspect I think is in some cases, when we look at from the Western lens, I think there's a case of short-term thinking. Because when I think in terms of the amount of work that needs to be done in developing countries, at times there's no infrastructure, processes are not there. It brings the case of just moving ahead. So we just leave the people in developing countries at some point, either they have to leapfrog. The developing countries of the world haven't got into that industrial revolution and boom, which a lot of the Western countries have all gone past. That place is now an opportunity. These continents, these countries is an opportunity to equip and invest, because remember, you're not reinventing the technology anymore. They're already out there. So even let's think about the iPhone. iPhone 15 just came out. In some parts of the world, they might not need an iPhone 15. They might just need a technology of an iPhone 6. The IP is already there. The infrastructure is already there. So you just have to take that and just duplicate. You're not creating something new. So for me, it's a case of reuse. So when you look at technology from the West, they just need to reuse them in these places. And guess what? You're making money at the same time. So I think it's a win-win for both sides. With how things are portrayed in the news and the media, people don't invest as much. And again, a lot of these developing countries are ripe with opportunities. It reminds me of this story, Shankar, about two companies that went to India, about the shoe company that went to India. And one said, I see maybe over 100,000 people and says none of them wear shoes. This is not a feasible project, and they didn't make it happen. The other one said, I see 100,000 people and they don't have shoes. And this person said, oh my goodness, what an opportunity. So I think when we focus on the opportunities and the possibilities, not the problems, then definitely we're going to have a headway.
Yeah, I think that's a true story. And I think the company is Bata, one of the
Okay.
largest shoe manufacturers and footwear manufacturers, not only in India, but they export a lot. I'm so glad that there's a beacon of light like you helping people within Intel and through your books and your writings and your talks, helping people around the world. Um, so thank you for that. And it's really valuable, especially during these changing times when we are all trying to figure out what's the next best thing to do and how to truly become who we want to be. And to people out there, I'm always looking for different views, different ways of living life, because at the end of the day, technology is in the service of people. And hopefully, it's not all people in the service of technology. So please come forward. Tell us more about your future books as they come along, Dr. Richard. There's so much to learn. And yes, I truly appreciate your chemistry with people and the processes that you have been formulating to help people to grow.
Thank you, Shankar, and also your audience, listening as well. I've seen some of the work that you've done, like when I saw you traveling around the world and all of that is all about making a difference in people's lives. And one of the things I often speak to my leaders about is all of us at some day we're going to be on our deathbed. It's not something anyone wants to think about, including myself. None of us is going to be thinking, oh, I had one more objective to achieve, or I had one more trophy to win, or I wish I had accomplished that. No, what we'll be thinking about is what's the legacy that we're leaving behind? When we are gone, what will we be remembered for? And that question is, if you have that picture, what do you want to be remembered for? How do I live that every day? Because today is a gift, tomorrow is a promise. So if we make do of good today, then we'll be creating that future that we've always dreamed about.
Thank you for all the gifts and the promises that you're presenting to all of us all the time.
No,
Thank you.
thank you, Shankar, for having me. Your best days ahead of you is just the beginning. And I know you've always shone wherever you are. You've always been the light to different audiences, different people. So I have no doubt that this world needs to hear more of you, to see more of you, and better things will come from it.